to Facebook, Twitter, not what do we get off of?
LinkedIn.
Is LinkedIn not working?
No. Periscope. No more Periscope, only Twitter.
Oh, yeah, Twitter.
Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We're about to start the Gillmor Gang millionth episode. All right, here we go. Places, everybody.
You say millionth, so
millionth,
so
whatever.
pleasurably.
Close enough. All right, and mute is off, and we're gonna go in 3, 2. Steve.
Hi, Steve Gillmor here. It's all about the timing.
Jeez.
What's the secret of comedy, by the way?
Timing.
You have to do it wrong. As the great leader Norm Macdonald says.
What?
Timing.
That's what he does. He's amazing. Did any of you guys watch what's the name of the show? The Connors?
Yeah, I've seen it a couple times.
Yeah, but
the new version.
It was a live show on like this, only funny. Well, at the end, they all held up a spoiler alert. They all held up a sign remembering they all sat at a sofa, the whole cast, and they held up a sign about Norm Macdonald.
It was nice to see a lot of people at the Emmys say nice things about him too, I thought.
I can recommend. Do you ever listen to Mark Maron's WTF podcast?
Not lately.
What WTF? What does that mean?
Well,
World Time Forever.
Right.
Foundation.
The car.
Mark Maron has been doing this podcast forever, interviewing comedians, and because he's in the business and a fan and very knowledgeable about the whole business of stand-up comedy, his interviews go to places that typical celebrity interviews don't go. And he has a great interview with Macdonald that he recently reposted, and it's worthwhile if you'd like to dig a little deeper into Norm.
You put it in the chat room.
I will do that.
Not the chat room, whatever the hell it's called.
I'll be going after Foundation tonight. I'll be going there.
I have a question, though. Serious question.
Uh-oh.
No, has the show started yet? I'm just
Yes, it has. We're well.
It has.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're almost done. Actually, I think we're finished.
Have we done
joining
the intros
us?
yet?
Well, since we've only got like 12 minutes before Brent has to leave, starting in Atlanta, Georgia, is Brent Leary. Welcome, Brent.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure to be back. It's sunny here in Atlanta for the first time in a week. Well, it was sunny yesterday, but we've been like in gray weather for 7 days before the last 2 days.
Also joining us from the state of Massachusetts, although he will say it's a Commonwealth and shakes his head disapprovingly, is Dennis Pombriant.
Here I am. Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. This has actually been a very interesting week from the perspective of all the meetings and what have you that Brent and I participated in because of Dreamforce.
Yes, that's very true. And Brent and Paul's fabulous, what is it called? CRM something.
Players.
Yeah, Players.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And Brent was, Dennis was on as a grizzled veteran in the. What's better than venerable?
That's a kiss of death.
Better than
Really?
that.
Yeah,
I call guys. I call folks that
for the rescue.
But wait a minute, I call folks that I really have a lot of respect for, that have been there and done that for years and years.
That's what grizzled means. Yes, it means tested under battle conditions.
I thought it meant that part of the meat that you don't eat. No, that's gristle.
Oh, man.
How you
Drizzled.
At
you
least
didn't-
I got that one.
In my neighborhood, it's drizzle.
What?
In my neighborhood, it's drizzled.
Ah,
Drizzled.
very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
we can always tell
geezer.
that from the
About geezer.
ever-present Mount something behind you.
Yes.
Oh, I'm missing your books graphic, but please don't change.
Not today.
Okay, thank you. Joining us, that person who just spoke is in the state of Washington, which is an eternal flux. And
It is. We had rain this past weekend, and we may have it next week. This is something.
but this is where I put the
Long time.
super. You have to put the super up.
Yes.
Okay,
I don't have to put it up. It
No.
comes from another source.
it does. And then you say what you were saying.
Oh, I was just going to say we're back to getting some rain. We're still, I think, in deficit, but it's good. It's good.
Okay, well, let's see. Joining us from Palo Alto is Keith Tier.
A great pleasure to be here. The words you were using remind me of the word visionary, which has been used with me several times, which is roughly translated as the a-hole who doesn't do anything.
You
How's that
speculate.
going for you?
I always took it because I don't want to do anything.
So it was accurate, is what you're
It
saying.
was accurate.
I see. Self-deprecation 101. And speaking of never doing that is Frank Radis. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you. Good to see you. Good to see
Compliment.
you all gangsters. And there are no words attached to me. None. Zero.
No, that's not true.
Well, I'm too old to be a wunderkind anymore. So yeah, there's no words attached to me.
Superstar, Frank, superstar.
Yeah.
That's how, when I see you, I immediately think superstar.
But that was kind of taken by the Warhol crowd. And
Yeah, again, 150 years ago.
Not to
What's your
mention
point?
Jesus Christ
Yeah.
kind of stole that designation as well.
That
Yes,
was
he
the one
did.
I was going to go
no,
with.
I never saw that show.
I have never been referred to as Jesus Christ. Jesus, maybe.
There's two shows I've never seen. Jesus
Really?
Christ Superstar is one, and the other is Hair. Who would?
I've never seen that either. I can't stand
I actually played in the pit band at both of those shows in the maybe 70s. Seems like.
There you go. There you go.
Well,
I told you.
I've never seen
Superstar.
Jesus Christ Superstar, but I did see Hair in Hebrew in Jerusalem.
Woo!
Wow.
Did they change the
Oh,
plot at all?
it may have been Tel Aviv. Probably Tel Aviv.
Do you
Did-
understand Hebrew, Michael? Did you have to go through? Did you have a bar mitzvah and have to speak Hebrew and everything?
I did have bar mitzvah. I had to read Hebrew and pronounce Hebrew. I didn't understand it at the time. I know a little bit more now, but I'm far from fluent.
That was like being when I was an altar boy and I had to completely memorize the mass in Latin. I had no clue what any of it was, but I memorized it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, my dad always used
I
to
meant-
call me Jesus Christ, and he was a carpenter too. I don't know what happened.
Nothing on the
But
list.
was he in that? He was in that band.
He must have been. Yeah.
Can I make a confession? When I was a little kid, when I heard that song, Jesus Christ Superstar, I thought the next line was after he said, Jesus Christ Superstar, who in the world do you think you are? And I think I'm going to blame that on my brother and sister for teaching me that. I didn't realize how wrong that was until I got to be like 40.
Oh, wait, is that real? Isn't that the lyric?
Is that it doesn't sound right.
I
You're
think
going to
that's
ask
the
Jesus
lyric.
Christ to say,
I
really?
think the last
Who in the
half
world
of
do
the
you
lyric
think
is-
you are?
That
That
they
is the
say
lyric.
you are. Are
Okay,
you the
Michael,
one
are
that
you,
they
are
say
you going to
are?
Google that?
No.
Are you the one that they say you are? It was a story about his travels, and are you really the Messiah?
Yeah, that's not what I thought I said.
Well,
I thought I said,
For,
who in the
for
world
tho-
do you think you are? That
basically.
sounds bad.
For those
Why-
of you,
why it's-
for those of
blasphemous.
you who are not familiar with the narrative, the Roman Jesus narrative was all about he isn't the Messiah. So, who in the world do you think you are is entirely appropriate.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. In other words, the Roman folks were basically saying there is a Messiah, but he's not it.
No, they didn't think there was one.
Oh,
No.
That's right. That's right. Jesus was seen as a terrorist. Well, not a terrorist. Someone trying to overthrow Roman rule.
Right.
He positioned himself as some kind of king on earth, which was really bad for the Romans. Romans could put up with a lot, but not challenge to their authority.
Right.
Oh, the exact lyrics are not what we said. They are, Jesus Christ, superstar, do you think you're what they say you are? In other words, it's a question.
Right.
Do you think you're what they say you are?
That doesn't
Who are
sound
you?
It
right.
shows you how important the lyrics
Clearly,
are
I
in
did not. I did not listen to the lyrics when I was playing in the band. Who listens to the lyrics when you're a guitar player?
I don't know. Those words don't seem to fit I like mine better, but I digress. You know.
Well, that's probably, nobody
There's-
remembers the lyrics to Hair either because everybody was dancing around naked.
We were all atheists, so we actually sang Who in the World Do You Think You Are as a kind of a aggressive anti-Jesus posture.
There's this great British comedian who listens to songs and plays them and then says the words he thinks that you're hearing. Then he mouths them again. It's unbelievably funny. I'll post it on the chat room someday. It's the guy's hilarious. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Benny Hill.
Oh my God, he is. Yeah, Benny Hill. Loved him.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I just want to point out we have now lost all of our red state audience.
When I think of Benny Hill,
I'm feeling better already.
when I hear Benny Hill, I immediately think of Loudon Wainwright, the third song, Benny Was a Tit Man.
No, it was Rufus was a tit man.
I know. I just replaced Rufus with Benny. But
The only Loudon Wainwright song I know is Dead Skunk in the Middle of
Yeah,
the
our
Road.
dog is named after that song.
and we just got them back.
Who? The dogs?
The red states.
Ah,
All right. So what's the political situation, Frank?
Yeah, how about that Arizona thing?
What else?
You don't like that? I think that's
No, I think those people are crazy.
How about that Texas thing?
Oh, okay. That's better.
Which Texas thing?
Well, the fact that
Pick one.
the
They do a
fact that
recount.
the former guy wants to recount the state that he won.
I'm good with that.
I am too, I guess. I mean, he's just
you can't lose.
no, he can't lose. What?
I mean, it just shows how crazy he is.
But in fact, though,
And we
what I read,
just don't have enough evidence of that so far.
yeah, but
right.
didn't he actually lose 200 and some votes in Arizona because of the recount? That's just insanity. It's the insanity clause.
Oh, you can't fool me. There ain't no insanity.
no, it's really clever because the narrative that Trump was badly done by lives on despite the facts. Every time he questions something, the narrative lives on in the minds of the zealots.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
he's on his way to becoming Paul Bunyan or some other mythical American here, John Henry.
Paul Bunyan isn't real?
He's
If
maybe
you start
he is
in
the
Dreamforce, he's probably
maybe
not real.
he may be the insanity clause. I just finished reading or listening to Peril. I don't know if any of you have read it or listened to it, but it is fantastic. It is really a great book. And
What do you think about the replacement of Carl Bernstein? Do you like that? I do.
I think that Costa is terrific, and Bernstein is. As you know, I
What,
work
he's
with Bernstein.
too old? I mean, come on.
No. I wasn't going to say that because
Venerable.
he's actually younger than I am. But
It's hard to see this as a replacement of Carl Bernstein.
yeah,
Woodward
I don't
worked
see that.
solo for
Yeah.
years, for decades without Carl
Yeah.
Bernstein. This is a new partner.
Well, he was on.
I mean, it's the
MSNBC.
slowest. It's the slowest replacement that I've ever seen. Bernstein was out, and and
Yeah,
Woodward was a solo
35
act.
years later.
Well, that's the way Bernstein, I mean, that's the way Woodward works. He's very slow. He doesn't, attribute anything to anybody. And he did go on MSNBC and suggest that he was looking for somebody younger.
Well, I saw them on MSNBC, and I actually thought they really got along well, and it was which was impressive for me to see, because Woodward he's a very deliberate speaker. When you listen to him talk, slow and thoughtful, and it was really interesting to hear him talking, and then Costa talking. And Costa didn't play up to Bernstein. They worked together, and I thought the way that that they talked about their process sounded an awful lot like the same process that Bernstein and Woodward had back in the Watergate days.
Thank you.
That
Did you
goes
catch
back
that, Michael? That was my context.
Okay.
That goes back to the time when journalists were close to private detectives, right? I mean, whereas today they're clickbait grabbers.
Yeah.
I mean, they're alcoholics and they sit around all what?
No, we were that then anyway, Steve. But
Not me. I don't drink.
But I did back then, and I did work with Carl when he was the bureau chief at ABC News back in I think the late 70s. He came in to run the office, and it was something to work with the guy. I actually didn't see him as that strong a television journalist, because one of the things that I don't see much anymore, and I guess the last time I was in a newsroom, was all of the telephone interviews that were done by the print journalists all the time. They were constantly on the phone, constantly doing interviews. And, nowadays, obviously, because of the 24-hour news cycle, it's
they're all
pretty
on
hard
TikTok now, basically, right?
Which is even worse. It's hard to be on the air and to be doing interviews and doing reporting. It's hard to do that. So consequently, a lot of that journalism that the reporters used to do got laid off onto the producers who were not on the air. So the producers would be doing that work and then handing it off to the journalists, which I have issues with that, and I don't see how that's ever going to get fixed.
But if you
that's why the British tradition is to call the people on camera presenters, not journalists.
Well, actually, that's because that's what they are. They hire them for their voice and their intonation, not for their journalism skills. Like Katty Kay, she's kind of a hybrid.
Yeah.
She's got both. But most of the ITN News and BBC News people in the UK, they are presenters. I was going to say, from a career point of view, can you think of a career that has gone down in status as much as being a journalist? If you say I'm a journalist, it used to have status.
Yeah.
A bit like I'm a politician used to have status. And those are probably the two biggest careers that have gone down in status during my lifetime massively.
I think it's cyclical. I've seen
a great
journalism go
example
up
of
and
that.
down.
I'm hearing two people and I can't hear either.
Just really quickly, I've seen journalism go up and down, and you can track the applications to journalism graduate school or a lot of different ways. In the 70s, right after Watergate, everybody wanted to be a journalist, and it kind of fell off. And with the ascension of Trump, I think we had a bump. So it's cyclical.
Michael?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that
Hang on a second. I want to hear the other comment by Michael.
It's hard to categorize all of journalism with one label. It's a spectrum, and the star investigative journalists today are as prestigious as ever. Ronan Farrow is a superstar. At the low end, there was that unfortunate woman in The White Lotus. If you saw that series,
That's great.
who called herself a journalist, and she basically just copied and pasted things that she found online and mildly rewrote them.
Yeah, and then admitted it.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you mentioned Ronan Farrow, who is clearly a really strong journalist. The people who impress me today in journalism are the ones who are doing the really long form stuff. So Ronan's stuff for magazines and the books that are being written by people like Woodward. Those are the ones that are impressing me. I would be hard pressed, I think, to name too many people on television or on cable or online who are spitting out short form stuff as being really strong journalists. Now, some of the ones who are covering war zones, that are doing live reporting from war zones and reporting at the moment, those people, I think many of them are impressive to me. But to me, the most impressive ones are the ones that are doing the long form stuff because they're taking the time to do the interviews.
I was struck today. I was reading the Daily Beast. It came across my radar. And the Daily Beast had a brief moment when it was a reference point for lots of TV journalism. And then it kind of passed, and Politico and Axios kind of became the reference points. And what that makes me think is that Michael's right. There still is really, really good journalism. And the good journalism does float as opposed to sink. But it bubbles under the radar. It's almost like there's only two successes. One is the Kara Swisher style, which I think is largely opinion-based and audience-based, but she's really good at it. And not that much investigation, although I think she has access to lots of sources. Then there's like really good investigative journalism that is all about the sources and is reporting what's going on. But neither of those two groups seems to own the category journalism anymore, if you know what I mean.
I think that, the flood of the 24-hour news cycle and the social media component of news just puts a lot of mud out into the field. So it's harder to pick out the gems.
It's in tomorrow, actually, on my newsletter. My lead story is about where are you getting your news these days, and there's a couple of new studies out that are showing, depending on your age, if you're 60 plus, you're getting your news from television and from cable, primarily. The 6:30 newscasts are really aged demographic, but the larger audience is coming not from cable and not from broadcast, but from social media. And I think, how much of social media can be solid investigative journalism or real reporting versus the White Lotus style of cut and paste and put it up. It's that to me is kind of depressing. I don't know that. I mean, there are a number of new or not so new organizations out there like Vice or Vox or Aussie Media, where Caddy K ended up going to. I'm still kind of shaking my head about that. Don't quite know what that's all about. And Business Insider. There's a number of pretty decent social media organizations doing news, but they are not bubbling up into that in that study. They have not bubbled up. What's bubbled up is Twitter and TikTok and Facebook and sort of the usual suspects. And I think that's depressing.
Dennis, is it true that you can have a study that will say anything you want it to?
Well, not me, but one could do that, yes.
Yeah, the royal one. So in this case,
you cherry pick your data.
I mean, well, fair enough. What I'm asking Brent is there anybody in journalism that you look up or side to?
Wow. What
Tucker Carlson.
Side.
Oh
my
I
God.
have to say, there's nobody that comes to mind right away. I mean, not one person do I say I gotta read this person. There's nobody like that for me, at least not right now.
So where do you get your inspiration for continuing to feel like there's some hope in the world?
Wow, that was dark. Some hoping.
Could have been.
You
could
know
have
what?
been
I
more.
have to say, I spend more and more time watching stuff on YouTube. Maybe it's because of this kind of information I'm looking for. Because look, there's, I'm not looking for inspiration. I'm looking for information. I'm looking for how to do stuff. I'm not looking to, maybe that's just my personality, but when I want to feel good or something like that, I look for print stuff. Frank knows because I'm always tagging him on Facebook about, hey, Frank, have you seen this one? So when it comes to like looking for information, you got me hooked on Feedly, and I'm pulling in all sorts of stuff, and I go through that. I find something I like. Don't ask me who wrote it. I won't know it until I really go through it. But I like a lot of stuff on YouTube, and most of those guys, I don't know them from a hole in the wall, but they capture my attention for something.
That's very interesting, Brent.
What was that word? Interesting. Go ahead.
Yes, because that not knowing who it is that wrote it is, to me, I don't know. It's almost like a degradation of what journalism is. Somebody is out there working really hard at trying to tell a story, and then presenting that story. And I want to go away going, yeah, that's another great story. They're written by Bob Woodward, or I can tell that was done by Bob Costas. Bob Costas. Who, by the way. Who was
Bob Costa,
Bob Costas, who was actually a good sports journalist, by the way. He was hardworking.
Fair enough.
So I'm Robert Costa. Isn't that the name of the guy that wrote the book with? Yeah. So he's terrific, obviously. But I was going for a sports journalist, because I don't know how many of them out there are still doing that kind of work anymore. I don't know, Brent. Do you?
On the Atlantic, and is it the Athletic or the Atlantic? I can't remember. Well, that's one that, like, all the sports dudes that used to work at the traditional rags, they got together. Now they're doing like longer form content around sports, and there's some good stuff in the Athletic. It's either Athletic or the Atlantic. I can't remember. I think it's the Athletic. Then you got like these kind of like these hybrids. All of a sudden you're seeing everybody's got a damn podcast or a video podcast. So even like folks like Shaq. Shaq is on, one of the most popular pregame shows in NBA, and that's not enough. He's got his own podcast, and then you got like folks like on ESPN, Stephen A. Smith, who I know he's an acquired taste. Believe me, sometimes I can't deal with it, but he's on TV. He's got radio. He's got podcasts. It's like, sometimes I can't take enough too much of these folks, because look, you're already on a national platform. I don't need to see or hear you 24/7. I actually look for people I don't know, but if I read if I get a headline that catches my attention, I'm reading it. I don't care about who it is at that point. I'm just reading it because it's interesting. And I want to see if it's good. I don't want to be clouded or, I got to read it because it's so-and-so. I can't do that right now.
I'm not sure that I look at it the same way. I find podcasts by people who already have a broad audience to be more interesting than the broad audience show, because they're not watered down to the crowd. They go specific. When Rachel Maddow did her show on Spyro T. Agnew, I mean, what the hell?
Spyro. That was the band. That was Spyro Gyra. So
that was a good band.
That was. I when I listen to podcasts, the ones that I like are the ones that actually sound like they've got lots of stuff in it. So there's lots of different interviews, lots of cool sound effects, and there's music, and it's and there's the writing is is dramatic but a podcast that's just an interview, I'm not that interested in unless it's a really important individual that I don't get to hear very much of. Those kinds of podcasts are less interesting to me, and I've used that word twice now, than something that feels like it's a production.
3 times.
I think NPR does some really interesting podcasts because it's just like Frank described. There's a story and there's music in the background and it's like a full production. It's just not a guy turn on his mic. So he's been on, national TV for the last 2 hours. And now I'm going to listen to him some more, just talk.
Mm-hmm. No, but I don't listen to the 2-hour show. I just go direct to the podcast. I'm not kidding.
I did
I think Kara Swisher, for example, she's got a podcast or whatever it is, live audio thing that she does on Twitter Spaces. That's the best thing she does.
Yeah, and that's with Casey Newton.
Well, he's a frequent guest, yes. Yeah. But the other thing that she does, which is she just signed a deal, I think, with the New York Times to do a newsletter. And I find that content to be more compelling than when she does something broad in the New York Times, over the paywall.
So to me, that's authentic opinion. Michael Arrington really pioneered this, by the way, just to give him some credit. When he did TechCrunch, nobody was doing what he did, which was putting himself in the middle of personalities with an opinion, dispassionate, up, to the point of pissing them off and becoming their enemy, if necessary, without him flinching. He really pioneered this style of interesting, informed, access to sources, opinionated content that was not part of mainstream media, but was all built around that person's capabilities.
But that's not journalism. It's opinion. It's op-ed.
Well, no, but it's informed.
No, I disagree, Frank. Is Armies of the Night, was that journalism or was that a novel? What? Come on. I mean, Arrington, basically rewrote the book, and now everybody does what he did. That's what Kara's doing now. Kara was not a big fan of Mike Arrington at the time.
Still isn't.
Whatever. All I'm trying to point out is that she has learned from him as much as he learned from her.
So I covered the invasion of Grenada, and this friend of mine, and I was down there, and this back in the 80s. And this friend of mine, a guy named Mark Shearer, who was a radio journalist at the same time, was there and covered that story at the same time. And he called me and asked if I would participate in a podcast on what it was like to cover that event that he wants to put out after, I don't know how many years it would be for the anniversary. And so we did an interview for about 2 hours, and he sent me the first episode of it. And there was no opinion in it, but it was a brilliantly crafted a production of the events that occurred, how the story broke, how people were transported to that part of the world from wherever they were, and how they ended up in Barbados and tried to get over to Grenada during the invasion at the time the military, the Marines went in. And it was fascinating, but it had absolutely no opinion. And I think that's kind of the point I was trying to make. I think there's a fine line between opinion and journalism today, especially. And I certainly could be, my mind can be changed about that, Steve. If it's done well. I'm not familiar with Arrington stuff.
Well, it's like I said, it's not really about Mike Arrington. It's more about a tradition that was, which was, hello?
Sorry.
Yeah. a voice from the past. Oh, it's
Yeah.
Something.
it to me, it's more about a tradition that was started with what's the guy's name, who was Rolling Stone
Tom
writer
Wolfe?
Hunter Thompson.
Oh,
Before
Hunter
him, Tom Wolfe. That's exactly right. Tom Wolfe was the guy who just said, "Screw it, we're going to just go in both directions simultaneously, and it's going to work." And
Well, yes, you're right.
in
Hunter
his
Thompson
case,
was
with the electric acid Kool-Aid test, it worked. And
electric Kool-Aid acid test.
and then Hunter Thompson came along and just went way out on that. Not only wrote about the drugs, but took them all. And that became part of his personality, which, eventually doomed him. But these people, there are modern counterparts to those people. And my suggestion is that I think you would do well, Frank, because in many ways, at least on this show, in this conversation, you're sort of the keeper of the flame because of your broad experience going back to, the ground zero with, the creation of Nightline. So I think this is a major issue. And I find emotionally watching the current news networks with their classic disregard for ethics of any kind in their pursuit of whatever they think their business model is. I find this to be a serious problem. If the fourth estate, if the fourth estate can't become a factor in this, the Supreme Court's already gone. The politics is a morass. Where are we going to get some credible information to compete at least with the misinformation that's out there?
Books.
Muckrakers.
What?
Muckrakers.
Can you name me one, Dennis?
Some of the people
Tucker
you've
Carlson.
named, no, he's not a muckraker. Some of the people you've named, I would say stand up to some of the best work of people like Ida Tarbell, who 100 years ago went after the trusts. And I think a lot of people on cable these days, on MSNBC, for example, are willing to rake the muck and bring Donald Trump's tax returns to the audience and do a lot of other things.
Get a healthy lawsuit, it appears. Tina has something to read.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one of our longtime viewers, Laura Norvig, was agreeing with some of you, saying it's interesting that newspapers have an opinion section. In the old days, that would distinguish pieces from straight up journalism based on facts, even though facts can be selective, of course. But these days, yeah, there's very little distinction between journalism and opinion.
Certainly on television and on cable.
But I do think that there's a great, Glasgow University has this media department, and they put out a book every year called Bad News. And Bad News is looking at fact-based journalism, and it takes labels like terrorist and many others and shows how it isn't fact-based at all. It's ideological, because even the language used frames the story. And so I don't think there's such a thing as fact-based journalism. I think there are facts and there is journalism, and some journalists use facts and others don't. And some use opinion more than facts, others use facts more than opinion. But I doubt there's really a pure journalist who is simply reporting facts, because they'd be boring. We wouldn't even read them.
Well, you can't.
And I think you put your finger on something very.
Michael, I started before you.
No, I think there's something very important in talking about.
All right, but when both of you talk, neither of you can be heard.
Which one do you want to go?
Well, you're the moderator.
Work it out. You two. I'm not the moderator. Work it out. Who wants to talk first? of
I
YouTube?
do. I started first.
Go ahead.
What was I saying?
I don't know.
You know what? My train of thought is gone.
Okay,
I'll be
Michael.
back.
Glasgow University, bad news, triggers.
Michael, go ahead.
I think we tend to romanticize the past of journalism. Journalism has always had a spectrum of opinion and fact and lies and serving private interests. And they've also had more objective, more balanced, and deeper digging reporting. It's not like it's suddenly gone bad. It's always been a mixture. At the start of journalism in the U.S., the newspapers were basically party organs. Even before our political parties had structures and offices and central committees, they were run through newspapers. So it's not that it's suddenly fallen apart. Basically, what we've had is an explosion of sources and an explosion of media that make it harder to identify where the voice is coming from. So if you have someone who is opinionated but is very upfront about what their opinion represents, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's one of the virtues of what Arrington did and what Tom Wolfe did. You know who they are, you know their point of view. They're not hiding it. They're not trying to foist upon you a notion that something is objectively true when it's filtered through their own experience. And you, as a reader, as a listener, and as a viewer, you can sort that out if you pay attention.
Dennis, do you remember what you were talking about?
I think I was going to say that we all know that we've all heard that journalism is the first draft of history. And if that's true, I don't think it's as important to get everything right the first time. It's important to get a story out so that it gets into circulation so that we can improve it.
I think the whole concept of balance comes from the recognition that everyone has a point of view. And so balance usually is actioned by having different voices at the table, like we do. You know, none of us feel an obligation to be right. We just feel an obligation to say what. Well, you do, yeah. But the rest.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't know about that.
But mostly we just have an obligation to say what we think, informed by what we know or think we know. And then people figure out what they, believe, disagree with, or agree with. So, and balance is what gets lost in the bubble, of course. You don't have balance. You just hear the same stuff over and over again. And you've got to fight to get outside of the bubble to find stuff that gives you the balance. I found myself this week, questioning my own ideological framework after reading a review of The Contrarian, the book about Peter Thiel, that's just been published in The Economist, did a review of the book. And, my framework was, I don't like Peter Thiel, he's a Republican, blah, blah. But when I was forced to read it and think about it, I ended up in my editorial trying to understand what's good about Peter Thiel and how Peter Thiel isn't that different than people on the left, let's say. And so it's balance, forcing yourself to have balance is how you learn. And reading stuff you disagree with is how you learn. So you want to hear people you disagree with.
I think that's right, but we've also corrupted the idea of balance a long time ago. Today, balance in journalism means what's the opposite, not necessarily what's balanced about this. So you always get somebody with a flat Earth theory saying as the balance, when in point of fact, what you should be doing is gathering a lot of not necessarily coinciding data.
Look at our current situation. We have one party that is organized around lying objectively. They are proposed, their whole their whole raison d'etre at this point is to promote lies. They don't have policies. They just have a lie that they're trying to promulgate, and they're trying to make policy to support their lie. It's when we talk about being objective and finding balance, let's not lose sight of the fact that we are all participants in a struggle, and it's a struggle that's going on to save the planet, to either reach or prevent reaching a multicultural, multi-ethnic democratic society, or a white-dominated society. We're all part of this struggle. We're not in some kind of remote cabin just looking at what's going on down there in the United States. We are all part of this, and we're all participants. So looking for objectivity in the news is I think, maybe the wrong thing to look for.
Well, but the audience isn't necessarily looking for objectivity either today.
Yes, I agree with that. Many of them come to it from an emotional commitment to begin with.
Right. They just want validation.
Yes.
Well, what you were saying, Dennis, about how the story unfolds. So the first chapter is the first reading of the story, and then it's fixed over time, or it's changed over time. And I was thinking, as you were saying that, about how that worked in the old days with newspapers, because a newspaper would be, the morning edition would come out with the first story, and there was an opportunity for an afternoon edition and maybe even a late night edition. That seems to have gone away because the newspapers aren't doing that. And now fast forward to TV, which immediately comes out with the very first story, which might be 100% wrong and in the opposite direction. And they have an opportunity to immediately fix it, and don't always do so. And so I think of a Fox and a Newsmax and an OAN when I think about that, because they're delivering to their specific audiences a kind of journalism that their specific audience wants.
Yeah, well, my attitude about that is, so what?
Well, I'm not.
I mean, so what? So what if they have a hard-coded audience that thinks that vaccines have little batteries in them that are whatever the hell it is? I mean,
microchips.
Yeah, well, now that does. I think that was a brilliant idea.
I think a lot more. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say the people who created ivermectin, they're the ones with the microchips.
So I
Do you know the inventor won a Nobel Prize for that?
What?
The microchip or ivermectin? Yeah,
won a Nobel Prize. I think it was 2015. It wasn't that long ago.
And that's been part of the argument to use that drug.
Yeah, you can't just pick something out of the medicine cabinet and say, let's try this. And people that are doing that are the same people who think that you can get a scrape in playing football and just rub a little mud on it and it'll be better.
Hydroxychloroquine was an example of that, I think.
Absolutely.
So let me take the opposite side for a second. I find it insidious the way that the Democrats talk about the collapse of democracy when they are challenged about big ticket programs that they think are going to get them a broad audience and therefore retain or extend their power. Anybody have a problem with that?
Yeah, I agree.
Nonsense.
What?
I think that's nonsensical.
What I just said?
Yeah, I do. There are two separate things going on. The challenge to democracy has nothing to do with the programs in Biden's agenda. The challenge to democracy has to do with the Republicans who are trying to cook elections. That's a separate issue. When the Democrats scream about the challenge to democracy, that has nothing to do with Biden's program. That's another thing.
Or insurrection.
When,
right.
when the conversation with a Democrat on the the various committees that are now trying to resolve the infrastructure deal, when Democrats are challenged about the rationale for why they are going to be or pretend to be intransigent about their position, say the progressives or the moderates. When they're challenged about that, they run out of facts, and then they go to this larger kind of overarching theory that because the Republicans are doing egregious things with truth, that somehow means that we have to agree to the Democratic position. To me, it rings this kind of odd.
No, that's not what's
I'd
happening.
like you to point
I
to someone
don't-
who said that. I haven't heard anyone say
Okay,
that.
I was going to say that. I haven't
Hang
heard
on a
that
second.
either.
I'd like to hear Dennis, because I think, Dennis, do you understand what I'm trying to say? However,
I do,
poorly-
but I think I don't agree with what you're saying. I think
that's fine, but can you
Yes.
explain
When
why?
the Democrats talk about anti-democracy, what they're zeroing in on is the fact that they can't get popular legislation through Congress because of the 60 vote threshold of the filibuster in the Senate. That is anti-democratic.
Okay, I agree, but then
there's a bigger.
but
Steve.
then hang on a sec. But then what? Why are we listening to this particular Democrat, since they apparently are being foiled by this right-wing agenda? Why?
Because
What
because
does that mean? Does it mean that somehow, if we just shake our heads long enough, that somehow the Republicans are going to stop getting away with this? That's
no,
what I'm
what it
asking.
means. What it means is the Democrats aren't playing the same game as the Republicans, and that's the Democrats' problem. Democrats think that they can influence the public to send telegrams to their senators and express themselves and change the way their senators vote. But that's not what's going on. What's going on is the Republicans have decided that politics is one step away from warfare, and they're fighting war, and Democrats are trying to seek and achieve bipartisanship when it's not possible.
Let's understand something else. The Democrats are not alone. Almost all of the Democrats have one position, and because of the 50-50 split, 2 or 3 or 5 Democrats are able to stymie the rest of them. I mean, if Manchin and Sinema said, let's get rid of the filibuster, all of this goes away.
But
I
they
think it's-
don't, and it doesn't. So now what?
Steve, let me just frame something. I think
I'd like to hear in your framing an answer to what Michael just said.
Yeah. So the way I think you have to assess the Democrats and the Republicans in the context of this debate about democracy, you have to start with some foundational stuff, which is democracy is where people represent us collectively for what our aspirations are for the next stage in our life. And so we elect them and they go there. And democracy is then the mechanism, it's a tool set, which is meant to implement some agenda that we voted for. Now, it seems to me that a successful use of this tool set leads to, like in the UK, from the point of view of the parties, it leads to a single party state. If you're successful, the other parties become unelectable. And that's your goal, to make the other parties unelectable. And the tool set stands in your way, and you have to leverage this tool set with the goal of making the other party unelectable, not because you want to destroy democracy, but because you want to carry out the agenda that you've been elected to do. So in a way, all's fair in love and war at that level. both parties should seek to get enough votes to render the other party a permanent minority.
Okay, so how are the Democrats doing that?
They're trying to do it in two ways. Number one is they haven't really got enough of a majority in the institutions to be free of blockage. And the Republicans' job is to keep that true by doing whatever.
I'm not asking about the Republicans. They're doing a pretty good job of messing things up here. I'm asking you about go ahead.
Saying goodbye to Brent.
Oh, Brent. Bye.
Go.
Wow.
Here's what the Democrats are doing. I think they all have realized that unless something is passed, they are all cooked in the next election in 2022. So they all recognize they have a common need to get something passed. And what we're watching is a dance that will go on for another couple of weeks to determine exactly what does get passed. It's going to be pretty substantial. It's not going to be what anyone is at the moment proposing, but they will get there. I have full confidence that they will. And the thing that gets passed will be something worth running on.
Yeah. I think what you're going to see is that the Democrats won't. There are two kinds of infrastructure, according to Republicans: good infrastructure and bad infrastructure. Republicans are in favor of the $1 trillion good infrastructure package. Democrats want that plus, and the Democrats are not going to let only the good package pass, which is why you have gridlock right now.
I want to go back to Steve's original comment, though. I don't see any of this, Steve, as being a battle against the ideology of democracy. I see it as being democratic, but not an issue of democracy. I think what Michael was saying is very specific and understandable. That that there are some things that feel undemocratic, but that isn't about democracy. I think the battle for democracy happened on the 6th of January. That to me was a battle of democracy.
I personally, Frank, don't believe that most Democrats give a shit about democracy as a concept. They give a shit about power.
Yeah.
Everybody should care about.
Yeah,
power.
I was going to say, I think that everyone on Capitol Hill, everyone in Washington, that's what they care about. That and money.
Yeah. Well, that money is the important thing too. That's a division we haven't talked about. We talk about left and right, but there's also the question of people who have a lot of money have an interest in keeping that money and making more of it.
Yeah.
And that has a lot to do with what shapes our policy.
I mean, look at what happened with the drugs.
The single most popular part of Biden's agenda in polling is lowering drug prices and allowing the government to negotiate lower prescription drug prices across the board. It polls well over 70%, and some polls 90%. People want that. Drug companies don't want it. Drug companies spend a lot of money keeping it from happening. So that's part of what goes on. That's not democratic.
There is a point that I want to respond to that Frank talked about. I just read a book that was a little disconcerting that brings up the term illiberal democracy. We like to think we live in a liberal democracy where we have laws, we apply the laws evenly, and we all have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But there are countries out there like Poland, for example, that are happily advertising themselves as illiberal democracies, and what you end up with is a patina of democracy overlaying an autocracy. So, for example, Poland suspended their Supreme Court or basically neutered it. I forget exactly how. And that's, I think, the concern that a lot of people have, especially people in the Democratic Party. But it's really hard to have that kind of discussion with the general public. You get catchwords like
But it doesn't mean that them, falling back on the collapse of democracy is anything other than, in my opinion, a strong tell that they don't have an end game here.
It's scare tactics is kind of what you're saying.
I think that they don't care. I don't know who said it. Maybe you did, Keith. I don't think people respond to this kind of nebulous panic. I mean, they clearly see that the Republicans are doing things that aren't right, but they also see the Republicans being successful at that.
It reminds me of a piece of history which tells you that political parties in certain situations will do things, extreme things that are not part of their core narrative historically. I'm thinking of the movie Rosa Luxemburg, when the German socialists threw her in the river and killed her. And the German socialists were not anti-democratic or dictators, but they were prepared to murder an opponent. Political parties, because they're mainly focused on power, in times of crisis, emotion takes over and extreme things happen if there's no founding principles that they believe in.
Well, just remember that Dennis weighed in early in this conversation to say, how many minutes, Frank? 7 minutes? Okay.
Yeah.
By saying that basically the Democrats didn't have an end game.
That's my point of view, but you've always reprimanded me rightly, I think, for saying, look, it's all about winning the next battle. I actually think you need.
I've never said that. What
I've
heard in this
there is no end
conversation,
game. There is no end game. History keeps unfolding.
but you see, I hear you, but I agree with what you said before about the flow of results from this struggle right now in the House and the Senate. I agree with you that they're going to come to some deal. So that would suggest that the Democrats fundamentally know this and are working in concert to accomplish this.
Sure, you want to get the best deal you can, so you're negotiating.
Yeah, I agree. So
Can I point out one real big irony?
Well, yeah, but I want to give Frank a chance to do what Brent didn't do, which was to say goodbye.
That I can do.
No,
But
because
I want to hear what Dennis has to say.
Yeah,
I
me
also
too.
have to
irony.
go when Frank goes, by the way. Steve.
Supreme irony is this: the weaker player in any set like this, in this case, we're talking about Democrats, appeals to process. If we're losing, it's because of process. We're not democratic. But consider this also. That's the same strategy that Donald Trump took with the election.
Process. Yeah.
Process.
Look, I disagree that the Democrats are the weaker player here. The Republicans are the weaker player, and all they have is bluster, and they're maximizing their bluster, but they don't have the power.
But
The
listen,
Republicans-
most of us are from the business world, either as observers or as participants. In a business agreement that where you're negotiating a contract, and the two different sides have their own self-interest, but eventually you make an agreement. If during that process or after it, either side would go out and basically shit on the other side and pursue some agenda that is beyond that contract, the contract would never happen because the business relationship would be dead right there in the water. So process only works if everybody is playing the same game.
Okay, Frank, last thoughts.
The only thoughts I have right now is this has been a fascinating conversation. I'm glad to have been a part of it. That's really all I have to say. And thank you all very much for having me today.
Last thoughts, Keith.
Well, last thoughts. Life remains interesting and will continue to be so. Therefore, there will be a Gillmor gang next week.
Oh, it's an interesting theory. Michael.
To be continued is my thought. We're in the middle of the show right now. We're ending our chapter today, but the show continues, and we'll see what happens next week.
And Dennis.
Small point, I keep trying to make a difference in any way I can. I right now have a published letter to the editor to the New York Times up online, and it'll be in print tomorrow.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's
Cool.
cogently expressed as well.
No, they wouldn't allow it to go up if it wasn't.
Send a link somewhere, Dennis. I haven't
Yeah.
seen
Yep. I want to see it. Can't
All
wait.
right. I want to thank all you guys. I want to thank Brent Leary for his unique participation. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor.
Thank you. Thank you. Great show, guys. Really a fascinating conversation.
I want to thank everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a good week.
My
Yeah,
friend.
you too.